Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar weekly discussion topic video. This one is going to be my kind of in-review, explained analysis of The Search as part of this kind of look back on the comics that we have so far ahead of the release of North and South Part 3 in a couple of weeks. So yeah, for this video we're doing The Search, the really important, probably still remains the most important of the comic series that we have up to now, because it is the one that reveals what happened to Zuko's mother, what happened to Ursa, as well as reintroducing Azula back into the story properly and presenting a character arc for her. And when this book was actually first announced, it definitely had people excited. Like, the promise people were into because it was the first Avatar comic series, it was the continuation. Of course people were invested, but it was definitely a mixed bag with regards to if people got super into the promise or if they thought it wasn't the best and wanted something more important. The Search definitely felt like they realized that they had to, early on in the comics, commit to doing something really big. And so telling the story of The Search made complete sense. And they made it very clear going into this one that Mike and Brian would be a lot more involved in this book than they were in The Promise. And in that they knew part of the story in place already, and Gene Yang would help them to construct a kind of full story around it. And in general, I think it was a pretty well-received book. Like, it's always going to be that one where someone asked a question in the fandom, what happened to Zuko's mother? You refer them to the fact that this book exists, they read it. It tends to not be a book that gets discussed all that much outside of like just the key points about like what happened to Ursa. But I do think there's a lot of good stuff within this book. To me, is it my favorite of the comics? Probably just because of the importance, but it's not like it's miles ahead of the other ones for me. I appreciate the focus this has on Ursa, on Zuko, on Azula. But I do like that some of the other comics have a nice blend of covering a variety of different topics as well as its main plot. So let's quickly jump into this. Now, this is a very difficult series to kind of talk about here because the amount of cuts back and forth between Ursa's backstory and then the present day stuff makes it very hard to kind of discuss scene by scene. So for each part of The Search, I'm going to kind of cover the flashback stuff separately and then the present day stuff separately. And we'll go through it that way. Because I think one of the biggest surprises when this book actually came out was how in-depth we were actually going into Ursa's flashbacks. We weren't just getting the what happened with Azula on that day, what led to her banishment, and where is she now. We full-on go back, 21-year-old Ursa. Where is she from? Who her parents are, who she was dating initially, how the Ozai marriage happened, how the first stages of the marriage went, and so on. We cover her whole life basically after this point, and it's really in depth, and it's what makes this book so interesting because we know a bit about Ursa from the show. We have an idea of her character, but this book is, to me, so much of what her character is. Similarly for Ozai, if you feel from the show that you don't know Ozai all that well, read The Promise, read The Search, and you will know his character a lot better because he's more of a focus as a character rather than a threat here. So anyway, we open up, and I think the first panel is very interesting to talk about because it references the last panel of The Search as well. And it's basically just this back and forth between two people. Wait, I want to know everything? Everything? Everything. For you, my dear, I'll start from the beginning. And everyone figured this out immediately. It's Ursa telling Zuko the story of her past. And that's why we're getting it. But it's how we get to this point. It's them telling us Zuko will find Ursa. Now, strap yourself in for the actual journey of how Zuko gets to that point and the importance of Ursa's backstory in telling this story. So I really liked how they did that without fully revealing everything, leaving a bit of mystery, just saying you'll get what you've came here for. But anyway, in the flashback we cut back to 21-year-old Ursa and her boyfriend at the time, Ikem. And they are basically practicing for a play, Love Amongst the Dragons, which is referenced a bunch of times in the show. They're wearing the masks and they have the leads in the play, basically. They're playing the love interest in the play, and they're the love interest in real life. They practice the final kissing scene, and it's very symbolic. Like, some of the stuff that is talked about here, it very much symbolizes kind of what they're going for within this book. Though I was trapped in the body of a mortal, you willingly gave me your heart. I cannot help but give you mine in return. Only with your glory, hidden in false form, could you finally recognize my devotion. The false form bit becomes very, very important, as does the idea of these masks and kind of what they represent, what they symbolize. But after they finish this scene, Noran basically starts talking again and proposes to Ursa. She says yes, and it's a super, super happy moment as she's engaged to Ikem now. It's immediately broken because she runs home to tell her mother and father that she's engaged now, happiest day of her life, it should be. But who does she find in her home with her mother and father? Fire Lord Azulon and Fire Prince Ozai. And Azulon just talks about the fact that he's been searching for ages to try and find the descendants of Avatar Roku, because the Fire Sages told him that the pairing of an Avatar's granddaughter with his own son would help to yield a bloodline of great power. And he says, one that would help to ensure my family's rule for centuries after I'm gone. And it's at this point that we get that it's an arranged marriage. That's how Ozai and Ursa get together. It's an arranged marriage forced upon them by Azulon. So that's why that happens. It explains why it's such a bad relationship as we know of it. But it's a very tragic moment for Ursa herself that this has had to happen. But yeah. As she's immediately being taken away back to the Fire Nation, Ikem blocks the path. He finds out what's going on here and wants to fight for the person he loves here, basically. He uses theater swords that aren't even sharp and manages to hold his own reasonably well against Firebender guards, but it's clear that if he fights for too much longer, he is going to be killed at some point. Ozai or Azulon are going to lose patience and just order this guy to be taken out, and Ursa doesn't want that to happen. So the only way she can save the person she truly cares about from being loved is to properly break his heart so he won't pursue her. It's the only way to in any way keep him safe, and she basically has to at the same time get a favor from Ozai to call off the guards, while also basically lying to herself, lying to Ikem, and saying that she actually joyfully accepted Ozai's hand in marriage. So it's a very tragic scene, as she says, Fire Prince Ozai honored my family by asking for my hand in marriage. I joyfully accepted. Now for your sake and mine, go home, as she's crying, as Ikem is left completely heartbroken. It's really kind of a tragic scene. The next thing we encounter in the flashback is Ikem on his own. We get a couple of pages of just him on his own. He's basically left the town, gone to live in the woods, and it's clear that a ton of time passes. He becomes somewhat disheveled, just completely depressed by what happened with Ursa. And we end with just the fact that he's sitting by a lake, and suddenly a giant spirit wolf appears next to him. And this is meant to be this really big, important moment that this wolf has appeared next to him. But anyway, from there we cut back to Ursa and the actual marriage to Ozai. On the day of the wedding, what Ozai says to her here is shocking. Ursa's parents are at the wedding here, but he basically says, say your last words to your parents. They should be filled with kindness, because they'll be the last time you'll ever see them. And he says, after this day, do not mention Hira'a, your family, or your old life ever again. You belong to the royal family now, and to me. And it's at this point that Ursa, I suppose, truly realizes what she's gotten herself into here. That she thought she could, to some degree, accept this, that Ozai couldn't possibly be that bad of a person, even if it's not the person she truly loves. Maybe there can be something within this kind of new situation she's found herself in. But immediately the person that she's with has basically told her, abandon your life. You belong to me now. And you can see how cruel and kind of heartless basically he is. So from there we cut back to the next section of the flashback, which is actually one of the few parts that's separated by a good few pages. Before we cut back to the flashback, it's a while. But when we do, it's Ursa writing a letter that is very, very important for this entire series overall. what Ursa has actually written on this letter. She gives it to one of the servants who she seems to, trust, and basically says, like all the other letters, send this to Hira. Don't tell anyone in the Fire Nation that you sent this. But it's revealed that this servant has been working for Ozai this entire time and has been giving all of the letters directly to Ozai. And she specifically gives this one to Ozai because of what the contents of it. And Ozai is infuriated by what he reads on this message. And at this point in the story, we also in the present day figure out that this letter is like key. This is something that is going to get Azula on the throne and Zuko off the throne. That's how important this letter is. But anyway, so the reveal, I suppose I'll read the letter at this point in time, and then we'll do the present day side of the search part 1. What the letter says is, "My dearest Ikem, it's taken me a long time to admit it, but you were right. I belong with you, and nothing is worth this pain. My one consolation is our son Zuko. When I look into his eyes, it's as if I'm looking into yours. My thoughts are with you always. Love, Ursa." So the reveal there, just in one word, 2 words actually, our son, and she's writing this letter to Ikem. Basically saying that, like, Ursa was pregnant when she went to the Fire Nation to marry Ozai, and Zuko's not actually a part of the royal family. This has the cliffhanger ending, the reveal of this letter for part 1. It had an effect on the fandom that, like, one of the comics hasn't had up to now. I think most people had a feeling like they might reverse this at some point. There's more to this, and there was, but to a degree at the time, like, not really having much evidence. This being the big plot point to get him off the throne. Some people were, like, freaking out about this. This was a huge thing at the time. But anyway, we'll move back to the present day story. With Zuko, it's all about family. He gets a lecture. He and all of the other kind of characters basically are lectured with regards to Yu Dao on the best way to form a leadership system in Yu Dao, as we're gradually advancing Yu Dao to over time becoming United Republic and seeing what it's about. And he hears about family and how, in a way, you should treat the people of a nation like a family. That way, that's the best way to, like, lead. And he begins to realize that he has problems with his family. That his father's in prison, his mother's banished, his sister's in a mental institution. He wants to try harder to fix his family. So he wants to kind of try and be nicer to Azula, so she'll help him to find out where their mother is. But she just wants a talk in private with Ozai, and he's kind of forced to let her to get any information on what's going on with Ursa. Azula managed to kind of, like, escape, and she goes to find the letter where it's hidden in Ozai's room. She pretends to burn it so that she has an advantage and can basically force Zuko into giving her a favor. And that favor is basically just that, I'll tell you a lead on where our mother is, on one condition: you let me go with you, not in a straitjacket, on my own. I'm allowed to be somewhat free, use my bending, kind of, you can watch me with regards to, like, security and stuff like that, but I want to walk around freely and with dignity. That's kind of all she asks for going out here. But it's clear that those 30 minutes that Zuko gave her with Ozai, some sort of a plan has been formulated. He told her enough that she could find information to kind of really help their cause. And basically, they head off after this point. Zuko gets Aang, Sokka, and Katara to come with him as extra security for Azula, and they head off to Hira, which is the reveal of, like, the bit of information that Azula gives to Zuko is that this is where Ursa's originally from. There's a potential that she might be there. And they encounter the spirit wolf for a bit as Azula tries to escape again. And we see it at a very important point in the book, right in the middle, that Azula walks by some water and sees a vision of Ursa, her mother. And she starts to have a conversation with it. And it's like ATLA and how you interpret the whole visions of Ursa situation, in that Ursa's not there. This is all in Azula's head. This is like the negative side of Azula talking to the positive side of Azula. The negative side of Azula thinks that Ursa thinks Azula's a monster, whereas the positive side knows that her mother has always loved her, and has kind of, in a way, misinterpreted the fact that Ursa was, shocked by some of Azula's behavior when she was younger with regards to how cruel she was, but never thought that she was a monster in that way. And it's just this conspiracy almost that Azula seems to have with her mother, that like she talks to everyone like, how did she get to you? How did she get you to do this to me and stuff like this? And you can see that it's a real problem. Azula really has lost herself. You see why she's in the mental institution. She helps them escape from the spirits though with using her lightning bending, and then the ending scene of the Search Part 1 is interesting. We get this really nice moment where it's kind of about sisters. Sokka sees that Katara's cold and puts a blanket over her. Zuko kind of tries to do the same to try with Azula, and as he does, he notices the letter, and this is where he picks up the letter, and we get the cliffhanger ending of Zuko basically figuring out that I'm not actually part of the Fire Nation royal family, and it's a huge reveal in how it plays out. So we move into the Search Part 2, and again we'll do the flashback stuff first, because it's pretty important. We were skipping ahead now to the kids being born, being slightly older, more in line with kind of some of the flashbacks that we actually see in the show. We see Azula burn a bush and explain that she did it because that bush wasn't as pretty as the others, and we see Ursa send Azula to her room to think about her actions as she kind of consoles Zuko, who's kind of scared by the fact that Azula just lit a bush on fire for some reason. And then on the other side of things, we see that Ozai has actually sent out someone to kill Ikem in response to just reading what the letter said. So we now see why Ozai was furious, because he has read this letter, he's intercepted this letter, and knows, and has just been told here that like your firstborn is not actually your son. This is Ikem's son. And for pure jealousy reasons, to spite his wife basically here, he sends Bashir, who is a Yuyan archer at this point in time, out to kill Ikem and Hira. So we get Bashir's backstory here, which is really cool. But anyway, we then cut to a family kind of dinner between the family. And we get the origin of the whole she was born lucky, I was lucky to be born line from Zuko, and how that comes into play. And it's just Zuko basically saying, trying to defend his and Azula's firebending teacher when they were young. And Ozai just kind of stamps it out and says like, you don't have any right to talk about being good at firebending because Azula's better than you despite being younger. You didn't have a spark when you were born. I didn't know. It took me so long to realize that you were actually a bender, and Azula never needed luck, but you were lucky to be born. And it's at this point he's basically gets note that Bashir has returned, and Bashir reveals that I searched for months in Hira and the Forgotten Woods as to find Ikem, but he wasn't there. There was no sign of him at all. I encountered so many hostile things in the woods and spent months looking for him, but I just couldn't find him. And he's done everything for Ozai here, but Ozai still basically says, hand in your resignation to Shainu. You're not a Yuyan archer anymore. You're not one of the best. You don't belong in that group. So that explains why he then joins the Rough Rhinos, and why he's a Yuyan archer who's not part of the Yuyan archers. But it's at this point, after finding out about the failure of the assassination of Ikem, that he goes to hurt still try and use this to hurt Ursa. He basically confronts her about the letter and basically tells her, I wiped that treacherous dog from existence. He's lying. He knows he hasn't killed Ikem, but he wants to do it to hurt her because of basically what he sees as, she lied to me, that, she has a kid with someone else. And it's this big betrayal from his point of view. So you see that they're kind of both doing these things to kind of hurt each other. But yes, we move on from there. And this is where we get the whole idea of Azula teasing Zuko about the fact that, Dad's gonna kill you. And we get this side of the conversation where Ursa asks Azula, what did you overhear? And she basically tells him that, Daddy asks for Iroh's birthright. Grandfather got really mad. He couldn't believe that and basically asked for the death of Zuko. So this is how Ursa finds out about the death of Zuko. She sends Azula to bed and then confronts Ozai about this. She is so serious about this. The fact that hearing that Ozai is going to kill Zuko because of his ambitions, basically. And she's the one who comes up with the plan. She basically says, I'm going to make you a deal. And Ozai says, you have nothing I want. And she says, you want the throne. And she says this, I know how to make a poison that's colorless and odorless and completely untraceable. It causes a person to pass quietly as if he'd simply fallen asleep. I'll give you a vial of it in exchange for Zuko's life. Once the poison is in your hands, do whatever you wish. And it's revealed that obviously previously her mother was a herbalist. She learned from that. That's how she knows how to make this. And he accepts the plan on one condition, that she leave and never come back. Because he basically now, in a way, fears her. Now knowing that she has the potential to make this deadly poison that could kill at any time, he kind of doesn't trust her anymore. That if he keeps her around, he could potentially end up the next one poisoned, knowing that Ursa has the potential to do this. So he banishes her for kind of his own safety in a way, though he's not afraid of her, I suppose, really here. But also because, he has a feeling that the blame on Azulon's death could be put on Ursa at some point. She argues, fine, but I'll take the children with me. And he says, no, they're collateral. They're collateral. As long as you keep your word and don't come back, no harm will come to either of them. And basically just says, I will hunt all of you down if you try and take the children, just like I hunted down your boyfriend. So she makes the vial of poison, and then this is where the goodbye moment happens. And we get an extended version of what it is from the show. She goes first into Azula's room, kisses her on the cheek, and leaves. And she plans to just do the same with Zuko. She plans to just go in there, kiss him on the cheek, and leave. But he wakes up, and this is why she has an actual talk with Zuko. And this is where we get the, remember this, Zuko, no matter how things seem to change, never forget who you are. And this line should be kept in mind with Ursa, given some of the decisions she makes later on. Never forget who you are, as one of the things that she says as she leaves the Fire Nation here because of this deal she made to save Zuko's life. So that's why Ursa was banished, because she that's how Ozai got the throne. Ozai killed his own father using the poison that Ursa supplied him as a way to basically save Zuko's life. And that's why that's in place. But anyway, from there we continue with the backstory, and Ursa returns to Hira'a. She immediately goes to Hira'a and basically immediately asked about her mother and father, but it's revealed that they had passed away years ago. She then encounters Noren, who we met obviously in part, who I suppose we meet in present day of this story, but we do meet now. He's basically the guy who runs the acting troupe at this point in time. And the reveal that happens here is interesting because he obviously remembers her and stuff like this, and he basically offers to get her kind of food and breakfast. He's aware that she used to kind of be from here. He kind of knows who she is, and we don't cut back to the kind of flashback side of the story just yet, but it's still an interesting one in part 2, how we kind of ended off with just this meeting of Ursa and Noren here. He says, it's almost sunrise. Sitting by yourself in front of an empty stage seems like a terrible way to start the day. Perhaps I could buy you breakfast. That's very kind of you. Thank you. So you already have these cogs going in your head, especially as we go into the present day side of the story here. So we start the present day side of the story immediately after that. So what's happened up to now has been that Zuko has just put the blanket over Azula and taken the letter to read. She, as she's asleep, basically has a dream about her mother. And what her mother says to her is very important. Give up this futile quest, my daughter. Go home. The throne is Zuko's destiny. Yours lies elsewhere. All your life, you've hidden behind a mask of intimidation and fear. Take off your mask. Only then will you see the beauty of your true destiny. And she's kind of set in stone, like, the throne is my destiny. And then she kind of calms down and is just like, isn't it? I mean, I have proof that Zuko's not meant to have the throne, and I should be I am Ozai's daughter. So she's like, no, it has to be because of this proof. But she's not. What she hasn't come to realize yet, and what she still doesn't realize in Smoke and Shadow, she hasn't taken off the mask of fear and intimidation and fear. She has accepted that her destiny right now in Smoke and Shadow isn't to be the Fire Lord, but she's definitely slightly misinterpreting things and hasn't fully committed to going down a different path and finding her, true destiny in a way. So these 2 pages are very important at the start here, to reference later on. We also see that Zuko and Aang have talked about this reveal, that Aang is now aware that Zuko is potentially not part of the royal family, and he's kind of questioning, like, what's this mean for your reign? Who's the rightful Fire Lord? He's panicking, because, like, what does this mean now? You're not the rightful Fire Lord. And Zuko's just kind of like, I have this odd sense of hope. I don't feel too bad about this. I'm not panicking. He feels like it almost explains a lot about his life, that I'm not like Ozai because I never was his, that I was always more like my mother, and I have this other father who I'm probably more like, and he's kind of like questioning all these things. But he still wants to try with Azula, even if they're, not, full, brother and sister, but only kind of, steps. I always confuse these kind of weird kind of half family relations. Is it stepsister? Half sister, I suppose is the best way to say it. Sorry. So yeah, we get this confrontation. At this point in time, Zuko seems to have the advantage over Azula when it comes to fights. And she kind of questions, you've had the letter all night. Why didn't you burn it? Why? Like, it's almost like you want me to have it. You want me to have this proof that will get you out of this. And he's just like, no, we have to continue on and do this. We can deal with this later. And from here, they basically arrive at the play. They arrive at Hira'a and they see the play taking place. Love Amongst the Dragons, and they witness the very end of it. And we get a very interesting reveal from Zuko and Azula here. Zuko notes, remember when Mother used to take us to watch the Ember Island players perform this play? Afterwards on the beach, you and I would reenact this very scene. I don't get why I always had to be the Dark Water Spirit, though. This being the character in the play who has the blue spirit mask, which explains why Zuko chose that as a kind of symbol of his kind of, I suppose, more rebellious persona when he was the blue spirit. And we see that Azula always chose to be the hero character in the play. Zuko always had to be the more villainous character in the play, and that explains it. It's at this point that the group meets Norin, who played the blue spirit in the play at this point, but was also the director of the play. He invites them back to his house because they're asking, obviously, about the history of Hira'a and Ursa and Ikem and so on. And it's here we meet his family. It's Norin, his wife Noriko, and their pretty young daughter Kiyi. Kiyi seems to get on really well with Zuko immediately, as Katara and Aang talk to Noriko, and there's a nice little moment when Noriko almost alludes to the fact that Katara and Aang are so in love, they'd almost, it'd be fine for them to get married this young almost. But they just talk about the whole idea of what happened and the speculation within the village about where everyone went, and the only thing that they kind of, the next part of the mystery basically is that they allude to the fact that that Ursa at some point went to look for Ikem in the Forgetful Valley. And this is this place that's meant to be, somewhat romantic, somewhat tragic, but it's this dark, dangerous place. No one who goes there ever returns. But Zuko is set on going to this place to figure out, about basically who he is, what he's about, and everything. So that's where they end up going. And in there, they encounter a lot of spirits that have kind of facial patterns on them. They see these very kind of calm kind of pools of water that remind Aang of the Tuyen Law Pool, the spirit oasis up in the North Pole. So this is a very, very spiritual place. And as they kind of explore the Forgetful Valley, they encounter two water tribe people whose names are Misu and Rafa. They're brother and sister. And Misu is doing everything for her brother to try and fix this problem he has with his face. When he was younger, something bad happened because of all this kind of... He had been stealing a lot, and it eventually kind of all the bad luck went against him, and his face was left horribly disfigured, and she searched everything, spiritual methods, to try and find a way to heal his face, and she found out about this spirit who had the power to give people new faces, and that could be the only way to actually save Rafa. And what they're going for here in the writing is obviously the fact that we now have 3 sets of brothers and sisters. Katara and Sokka, who get on very well, and it's a really nice relationship. They do anything for each other. Misu and Rafa, Misu's doing everything to save Rafa at this point in time. So you see really, really good stuff. And then this very distant, very fractured relationship between Zuko and Azula, which is not in any way like these other ones. Even though Zuko is trying, Azula's giving him nothing back, and she's lost in her own way. And they reveal that all of their years searching the Forgetful Valley for this spirit, they figured out how it works, but have never been able to properly encounter the spirit. The way it works is that there's 4 pools in the Forgetful Valley, which is a pretty big place. A wolf spirit goes to one of these pools at one point, and that is where the spirit comes out of. But they've always missed it. They've always gone to the wrong pool when the wolf makes its appearance, and haven't been able to get over to the pool in time. And this time they're hoping they can, because Aang is there as the Avatar, and he hopes to be able to talk to the spirit and basically find a way to get them in kind of contact. Azula snaps at this point in time and thinks that Misu and Rafa are just getting in their way of the mission to find Ursa, and she basically goes to kill them as Zuko lightning redirects it. And we end part 2 with the reveal of the spirit who deals with faces, the Mother of Faces. And she is this really unique looking kind of tree-like spirit who has these kind of 5 like really white glowing faces, and then the spirit of all these other type of faces and masks around her. So she just, from her like looking at her, seems kind of like this more nice, pure version of like Ko the Face Stealer in a way. Almost like she performs the opposite role to Ko, and it kind of turns out to be true, as we'll get into with part 3 of the search. So again, we'll cover the flashback stuff here initially, though we're getting to the point now where the 2 parts are beginning to overlap. We're almost catching up with the present, but not quite yet. So basically Ursa and Norin are effectively on a date here, and eventually he kind of reveals that, like, oh, he knows her name already before she's even revealed it to him. And it's at this point he kind of can't hold it in anymore, and he talks about, you know, the past, which was a scene reference from like the first part when they were younger. When we were 21, you shattered my heart. Can we have a proper conversation? My dear Ursa, don't you think you've hurt me enough? And she realizes it's Ikem, and they have their reunion at this point in time. He looks different, but it's him, and they've kind of found each other again. So there's that. And it is at this point, pretty early in part 3, that the Mother of Faces, just briefly touching on the present day story, the Mother of Faces at this point in the story reveals to like Zuko, Aang, Azula, everyone, that Noriko, Norin's wife, is Ursa, having gotten a new face from the Mother of Faces. So the important thing to keep in mind as we discuss this backstory is this power of the spirit. The Mother of Faces has the power to change someone's face and basically give them a new identity, and then later on it's revealed that she has some sort of kind of memory alteration abilities as well, that she can effectively reset a person so they have a new identity completely. They don't remember anything about who they were. They're a completely new person. But anyway, back in the past, you know, they kind of bond over the fact that you know, they remember the play stuff, and they're just so happy to have kind of found each other again. But the problem is that, you know, Ursa has had a previous family. She still has her kids. Norin has never had another family, and it's this idea of like, how do they kind of start this relationship again? Like, how can she just have a happy new life with the person she's always loved, always wanted to be with, and to a degree leave her kids behind? And he points out, you know, like this idea of like, what are you hoping for though? The way you've explained it to me, the best you could ever hope for is to just spy on them from afar, catch a glimpse of them in the city, you know, like look into the palace and see them grow up from afar, and like, what sort of a life is that? Just you, like, seeing them occasionally from afar, but never being able to interact with them in case Ozai breaks his promise to you and kills them. And she talks about how it's, as a mother, they're always a part of her. She always wonders what's going on with them, what's happening to them. It's torturous for her to be away from her and always be thinking about it. And he's told her at this point about the whole idea of the forgetful, the spirit of the Forgetful Valley, the Mother of Faces, that she can get a new identity and they can have their relationship as it was before without everyone realizing, oh, it's Ursa and Ikem from the past. That they can have their life be peaceful and to a degree, forget about everything from the past. And so what happens here is we get a kind of almost another kind of bookmark moment. In part one, we got Ikem wandering through the Forgetful Valley, like depressed, broken, and then encountering the wolf spirit, which is now implied that he encountered the wolf spirit, so he got a new identity after that point, and that's why Ikem was considered lost. That's why Vashir could never find Ikem, because he had become a different person. So it's all beginning to come together here. But this time, Noren and Ursa, happy together, found each other, basically are happy to kind of travel the Forgetful Valley and like live together, even if the weather is bad and the terrain is bad. They're just happy to kind of be with each other, and they talk about this idea of like these last few months living in the forest with you. I feel like I finally found my place in the world. And she just says, you don't know what Ozai is like. I wouldn't just be endangering me and my children, I'd be endangering you, probably the whole town. And at this point, the Mother of Faces appears. Ursa has her chance, and she asks for it. My name is Ursa. I heard you can give me a new face, a new identity. And the Mother of Faces says, why would a woman of such beauty desire a new face? Would you be willing to accept one much plainer than your own? And she says, any face will do as long as it's new. And the Mother of Faces says, Ursa, I sense much pain in you. Do you really believe a new face will relieve you of this pain? And she says, no, the pain comes from the memories of a life that I did not choose for myself. And she then reveals this kind of memory alteration power. I can do more than give you a new face. I can give you a new mind, one that does not remember the life that came before. And the clarification is basically that she will remember Noren because he will be a part of her new life, but she will have to forget like everything from her old life. And that includes Ozai, but also includes the people she doesn't want to forget from her old life, and that is her children. So she has to make this choice between basically like having this happy life with the person she loves, but always kind of having this tortured memory of knowing that her kids are out there basically in the hands of a madman who could like hurt them at any point, but never being able to be with them. And this idea of like having her happiness be balanced and offset by the fact that she has this fear about her children this entire time. Or she can actually have a way to start this new life, have it be happy, but also forget everything that happened before, all of the tragedy up to now, and it would just be the happy aspects of everything left. And she accepts it, and the Mother of Faces gives her a last choice. You must decide. And as she says yes, she basically says, Zuko Azula, I'm so horrible. As she kind of gets a new face, doesn't remember Zuko or Azula anymore, but is now happy with Noren. And this is where we see the wedding of Noren and Noriko, and the flashback has basically come full circle, more or less. That's basically everything about the flashback, except for one scene. And this is the reveal of what was said after the initial thing of Ozai confronting Ursa about the letter. So we get the full details on the letter revealed here. He basically, after he says, I wiped that treacherous dog from existence, Ursa says, you know as well as I do that Zuko is your son. And Ozai says, of course I knew it. I knew it the whole time. And says, why did you write a lie like this? And he says, I wanted to hurt you. Maybe it was just my wishful thinking that Zuko wasn't your son. And Ozai basically just says, is that truly what you wish, that Zuko were not mine? And she says, that he turns out nothing like you, yes. And then Ozai says, then that's how I'll treat him, dear wife. I want you to watch carefully from now on. Every time I speak harshly to him, every time I wound him, every time I treat Zuko if he were the son of a treacherous dog, I will simply be fulfilling his mother's wish. So the reason Ozai treats Zuko the way he does is basically Ozai being super spiteful because Ursa was not happy with the way her relationship with Ozai, because Ursa tried to get back at Ozai a little bit by kind of making this thing to upset Ozai that your firstborn isn't actually your firstborn. Ozai basically takes that to heart and is like, okay, that's the way I'll treat him then. That he's not my firstborn. He's just some other kid who happens to live with us. I'll treat like Azula like my firstborn and Zuko like a dog. And this is the explanation that they give for like why Ozai is so against him, and just the fact that he would go to this length. That Zuko has potential, we know that, but he's willing to put that all aside just to hurt Ursa more. And it speaks to who he is as a character, and that's the last bit of the flashback stuff that we get. So let's go to present day stuff. So again, we as I said, we get the reveal from the Mother of Faces that Ursa is Noriko, and Azula basically runs off immediately. She is heading for Noriko and Norin's house, and Zuko kind of goes to follow. But what happened to get to that point was that the Mother of Faces offered the whole group, I will answer like one question for you. And they were going to give the basically the question to Misu and Rafa, so Rafa could get his face fixed. But Azula jumps in and basically steals the question, asking about Ursa. Aang pursues the Mother of Faces to ask her about like how she can be so cruel and just like ignore these people who really need your help. And we get an interesting human spirit conflict thing about how, according to the Mother of Faces, these humans, they just they think I'm their servant. They just want me to do this for them all the time. So I just do it once a season. That's all I can tolerate. And you as the Avatar, you're meant to be the best of humans, but you're acting selfish here at this point in time. And we begin to see the hypocrisy of the Mother of Faces once some of the later reveals come out. But Zuko makes it back to Norin and Noriko's house, but Azula's not there. And everything seems very calm. They invite him in for dinner. Kiyi really wants to kind of have more time with Zuko. And at this point, we know what this is. According to Zuko right now, who thinks that this is his father, thinks that Noriko is his mother, even if they don't really, he's not sure that they all remember him or anything like that. We get this moment of effectively Zuko eating with his good family. His mother there, she's not named Ursa, but it is his mother there. This is Kiyi, who, as far as he's aware right now, is his like full sister, and his father Ikem. And it's happy, it's perfectly happy, and he kind of wants to talk to his mother about the fact that she's Ursa now, but he just asks her a question. Tell me, Noriko, are you happy? And she just says, yes, of course I am. I'm where I belong. And he's happy with that. He basically goes to leave. I've bothered you long enough. Have a good evening. But this is where Norin basically speaks up and is just like, I knew this would come sooner or later. I knew who you were, Zuko, the second you arrived in town because of your scar. Ask the question, tell her what you want to tell her. And this is where the reveal comes in. My name is Zuko, I'm the Lord of the Fire Nation, and I'm your son, saying this to Noriko. But we know at this point that she has forgotten her memories, so she doesn't know him. But we cut back to what's happening with Aang and the Mother of Faces. In the scuffle, as the spirits begin to attack everyone because the Mother of Faces is angry, Rafa's mask that's kind of covering his disfigurement blows off, and it's revealed that he just has no face. There's just a blank section where his face is meant to be. And Aang knows that this is related to Ko the Face Stealer. And as Aang says this, the Mother of Faces speaks up. What did you just say, Avatar? And he talks about the Ko the Face Stealer and how this is clearly his work. And immediately she's like, Ko the Face Stealer is my son. So it presents this amazing concept within the Avatar world that spirits can have family too. And she reveals, like having just basically scolded Aang for the imperfection of humans, she basically just says, Ko has been estranged estranged from me since time began. The legends say that much. He misses me so much. He spent all of his history stealing faces. How do you know him, Avatar? And he reveals the whole thing with Korok and the fact that Umi's face was stolen by Ko the Face Stealer, but Korok spared Ko and didn't kill him. So, as a favor in response to this, she heals Rafa's face, and we get this really nice moment of just a reunion between Rafa and Misu, as the Mother Faces really wants to make amends for this, and is basically, if Ursa wants it, whatever happens with Noriko and so on, that reveal, she will go to see Noriko and ask if she wants to get her memories back. So this is the final favor the Mother of Faces is willing to offer. And obviously what happens after this point is that Norin reveals to Noriko the truth. She doesn't know who she is, but he talks about it because he remembers who he was. He talks about how you were once the princess of the Fire Nation. You have, children elsewhere. Zuko here, Azula, they're your children. And as what happens here, Azula crashes through the roof. She has come to basically take out her mother, who in her mind has been the mastermind behind everything bad that's happened to her. And if she kills her mother, the voices in her head will be gone, and who's the monster now type situation. And it's actually an interesting reveal for Sokka that Sokka's been actually handling Azula one-on-one in a fight on top of the roof this whole time, to give Zuko this chance to talk. And as Azula goes in to kill Noriko just responds and says, even though she doesn't remember, if what you say is true, if I really am your mother, then I'm sorry I didn't love you enough. As Azula begins to kind of tear up and cry. So clearly this has an impact, but all she does at this point is basically a brief scuffle with Zuko. He basically just reveals that you thought this entire time since the letter that I have been happy that I'm not destined to be the Fire Lord. That's not the case. He puts the royal artifact in his hair, the thing that obviously Sozin gave to Roku that represents being the Fire Lord. He puts that in his hair and says, the throne, I've always known the throne is my destiny. That morning on the cliff, Azula, our relationship is so messed up. It's been like that as long as I can remember. And maybe it'll be like that for the rest of our lives. But one fact never changes, no matter what, that you're still my sister. And he wants to give her a chance. He wants, now that they found their family again, to include her in this. But she runs off and basically just says, same as always, Zuzu, even when you're strong, you're weak. And she just runs off. She escapes into the Forgetful Valley. That's where Azula has left. And that's where she exits this story. And then the Mother of Faces arrives to basically talk to Noriko and give her the chance. Basically, do you wish to remember? And she says yes. And we wake up the next morning and it's Zuko talking to Ursa. And it's really, really nice what happens here. Zuko, what I said to Azula, I owe that same apology to you. I'm sorry I didn't love you enough. Don't say that, but it's true. I forgot you. What kind of mother forgets her son? And he says, things turned out okay. I've got some good friends now and a life I can be proud of, and a crown on your head. You look so handsome, Zuko. I may not have the right to be, but I'm proud of you. And he just says, I know I'm the Fire Lord because it's my destiny. Even so, mother, I need to know more about this. And he talks about the letter, and this is where the reveal comes out, that the letter isn't true. You are actually Ozai's son. I did that basically just to spite him, and inadvertently led to the kind of bad life that you kind of ended up suffering. She just says, Ozai's a wretched man to treat you like that just to get back at me, especially when you were so young. And Zuko says, but he's still my father. And he says, I feel like things are the way they're meant to be. And Ursa says, there's so much I want to tell you about your father, about Ikem, about my life here and here. My marriage to Ozai was just so. And then we end with the panel that started it all. Wait, I want to know everything from the beginning. Everything? Everything. For you, my dear, I'll start from the beginning. And this is why we get the backstory. So that is The Search. This video was a good bit longer than I maybe expected it to be, but The Search is just packed with so much important information because there's effectively a whole single part full of backstory. There's probably 50 plus pages of backstory about Ursa in this book, and most of it's really important. And then there's a lot of important Azula Zuko development stuff. This is a pretty important book. Some of the stuff with regards to how they explain the Forgetful Valley and the details of that, it slows down a little bit in the middle of part 2 and aspects of part 3, but the core of the book, Ursa's backstory, the reveal about what happened in the past with the Zulon, all of that stuff, I think, works really well and makes this book one that I think is absolutely worth going back to. If you haven't read The Search in a while, go back and read it. I think it will really inform you a little bit more on Azula and potentially where they're taking her arc going forward, even beyond Smoke and Shadow. And it's a really good insight into Ozai, insight into Ursa herself, Zuko fully, truly embracing the role of Fire Lord, and then Azula's path as well. Like, this is the book that really got people, like, I really want to know when they'll finally commit to the, like, reunion between Ursa and Azula. But, yeah, that's basically been the video for this week. Next week we'll cover the Rift, which hopefully shouldn't be as long, because I don't think every single page of the Rift is like as important as most of the pages of the Search. So apologies for the much longer video this time out, but that's been the video for this week. Thanks for watching, and bye.